So our reading today is from Genesis chapter 1, verses 1 through 5, and 26 through 31. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was without form and void, and darkness was over the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. And God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. And God saw that the light was good. And God separated the light from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And there was evening, and there was morning, the first day. Then God said, "Let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over the livestock, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth." So God created man in his own image. In the image of God he created him. Male and female he created them. And God blessed them, and God said to them, "Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over every living thing that moves on the earth." And God said, "Behold, I have given you every plant yielding seed that is on the face of all the earth, and every tree with seed in its fruit. You shall have them for food, and to every beast of the earth, and to every bird of the heavens, and to everything that creeps on the earth, everything that has the breath of life, I have given every green plant for food." And it was so. And God saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was very good. And there was evening, and there was morning, the sixth day. The word of the Lord.
Good morning. My name is Josh Barton. I'm the student ministry pastor here at Trinity. So glad to have you this morning. Today is a big day. We've got a Super Bowl going on. For those of you that maybe don't follow football, here's how it goes. Every year the Patriots make the playoffs, and everybody except for Patriots fans hates them. And those of us that are Cardinals fans continue to live in misery. I know, I will take you can feel bad for me. If you are following along in the year of biblical literacy, today we are in the book of Leviticus. I want everybody to look around you and tell your friends around you that it's okay. We're going to make it. We're going to get through this together. And good news, if you did already read today's reading, I am not teaching on that. So for those of you that have read it, you understand what I'm saying, and for those of you that don't, go check it out. We are going through it, and we are actually going to be starting today a 5-week series, and we're going to call it The Story of God. We're going to take a big picture, a big look at this story. See, when we use the word story, what we're not saying is that we're not going through a fictional story. This isn't some myth that the Bible has given us that we're going to look at. No, what we're saying is that there is something powerful in story. It is woven into our being story, right? And so we're going to take this 30,000-foot view of the Bible from the beginning to the end, and we're going to look at it and say, hey, how does our story match up with God's story? Now, anybody go on Google Maps? I like Google Maps. I can look at maps all day. I have a ton of maps in my house, and I'll look at them, and I know it's a nerdy thing, but I like it. But if you go to Google Maps, I actually found a picture of my house. That's actually my house there with the 2 cars in it, and is it just me, or for some reason when I go on Google Maps and if I see like my cars at my house, I'm like, oh, check it out, my cars. Wow. But that never happens when you walk out your front door, right? Like every day you're like, oh, my cars. If it does happen, then, well, you live in a shady neighborhood. But I said shady just for the record. But what we're going to do is we're actually going to zoom out and take a bigger picture, because when you zoom out, you get a different view, right? And this is, if you look, this is when you zoom out and you did the little thing on the computer and you zoom out, you get a different view. And so that's what we're going to do as we look at the Bible. We're going to zoom out. Now, we could probably take 25 weeks to go through the story, but we're going to take 5. We're going to look at the fall, and we're going to look at creation, and then the fall, and then we'll look at the people of Israel, and then we're going to take a look at the life of Jesus, and then we'll look at times. And today we're going to start with Genesis in the beginning. But before we do that, I want to show you this quote from a guy named Mike Ear. And it's a great quote about story. He says this. He says, beyond a rule book, a systematic theology textbook, or a collection of inspiring sayings, the Bible presents itself to us as a story that describes the way things really are. When we read the Bible as a story, we allow it to speak for itself. Stories are the most common way people relate to each other, and we need a narrative that speaks the truth about who we are, who God is, and why life is the way it is. Stories reveal things to us in ways nothing else can. This is not like the way we engage a textbook or mathematics or a dusty tome about copyright law. No, this is the Bible, or this is encountering a person in the pages of a text. The Bible is revelatory, not just informational. Story is powerful. We relate to and connect with story. And so we're going to take a look over the next 5 weeks of this story of God. And what better place to start than in the very beginning? Now, before I jump into the actual text of Genesis 1, there's a few things I want to say about Genesis as we approach it. And we've talked about the Bible over the last month, but there's some really important things. I've worked with students my entire professional career. I've worked with middle school and high school students. And here's what I know to be true. And this is why what we do is so important. We have to help students, and not just students, but all of us. We have to help them to be able to approach the Bible in the way that the Bible was meant to be approached. You see, the Bible is an ancient text. And it was written by an ancient author in an ancient time to an ancient community. And we bring to it, when we open it up and start reading the pages, we bring to it a modern, postmodern lens. That's just the world we live in. That is our life experience. And so we have to be careful of how do we go back, open up the Bible, and look at it and say, okay, what was it that the author was intending to say? And how do we best learn that? You see, because there's a lot of different ways to approach the Bible. And the thing is it's a book of 66 books that makes up this library, right? And it's put together, and the whole story weaves together all these different stories, but it all has a bigger purpose. But it's made up of a lot of different genres and styles of writings with different authors. And you wouldn't read Shakespeare as if it was a math book, right? You don't read a poem as if it's trying to teach you science. And so while reading Genesis, we have to understand, okay, what genre? What are we coming to? You know, Genesis 1 is actually a poem. It's a beautiful poem that's written. You see, within the understanding in the Christian world, we have different ways that we approach the Bible. And there are a couple different sides, and I'm just going to point out a couple things that I think are important for us as we approach it. Because if we're reading it the wrong way, we're going to walk away with something, and we're probably going to be disappointed. Because in my time with students, what I have seen is that if they aren't reading it through the correct lens, or at least contextually taking it in, what happens is they go off to college, they get into their first philosophy class, their first history class, their first religion class, and all of a sudden, everything that they thought they knew was true gets blown up. And it's a faith crisis. You see, what happens, there's this way, that one of the ways that we can approach the Bible is through a very literal sense. As we look at it and we say, literally what it says is what it means, and that approach to the Bible can be very rigid. Right? Because anything new that comes up, whether it's through science or anything that, and honestly, we all know this, right? Like, we as human beings are advancing in our knowledge and our understanding of the world and how it works, of the future, of the past. Like, we're advancing in that. And so what happens in a very rigid approach to the Bible is, when new information comes up, we have to find a way to do some biblical gymnastics to make that new information fit within our framework. That's really hard to do. And then there's another approach too, where it's like over here, where if everything that we read in the Bible isn't absolutely provable through like a scientific method or something, then we just say, well, that's just allegory or metaphor, and it's not meant to be taken seriously. And if you can't prove it through that process, then don't take it at face value. And the problem with that approach is that you strip the Bible of all of the supernatural. You strip it of any miracles or anything that God might actually be doing. Here's something important to remember. God is the author of life. God invented science. And so, we can't constrain him within that box, because then actually that's kind of a small God, and I'm not interested in that. So where do we find ourselves? We gotta be, and it's okay, we can take a personal inventory and say, where am I on that spectrum? And where should I be? And as we approach the text, what I want to do is I wanna say, God, what might you have for us through this passage? You see, there was something important that when Genesis 1 was written, the Israelites were most likely in exile at the time. They were not in their homeland. And in the time when it was written, there were other origin stories of that time that were floating around that were very popular among other cultures and societies in the Mesopotamian era. And so understanding that this is not the only origin story of the time, but also understanding, okay, well, what's different about it? And I'm going to get to that in just a bit, because I actually think we can learn something about this origin story as opposed to the other ones. All right, now let's get into Genesis 1. I have 3 points I want to go through today. I'll tell you all three right now, and then we'll break them down one by one. First, God has a vision for the chaos. God has a vision for the chaos. Second point is that God's creation is good. And that one might seem obvious, like, yeah, God's creation is good. And the third one is that God invites us to be co-creators with him. I'm going to spend most of my time in that section. He invites us to be co-creators with him. Okay, so God has a vision for the chaos. And if you open up Genesis 1 and you look at it, at the very beginning, it says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was over the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. You see, in the beginning, there was void, and it was formless, but God has a vision for the chaos. God actually is going to bring light to the darkness. And this wasn't by chance. This wasn't by like he's going, I wasn't there. But I can assure you that it wasn't a result of like, I don't know what to do with all of this. What should I do? But there was always a plan. There's always a plan. And God was going to bring order to chaos. He had a purpose from the very beginning. And he brings form to the earth, and he brings form to man and humanity. Whenever I teach on Genesis, whether it's to students or whatever, I always end up like looking up some statistics about the universe. It just feels right. Like that's the time you go in and you start to learn some things about our solar system, about the Milky Way, the universe, and without fail, it is like mind-boggling. It is absolutely mind-boggling, the beauty. When the bigger you get, the more you learn about, like, I read something this week, it was like 70 like trillion stars, but who actually knows? We don't have time to count that. But it's like how many things out there, and like supernovas and the way stars rotate. I mean, it's mind-boggling. And then actually if you go and you look at how small the tiny, most minute detail is of like how even we are put together, you cannot help but go, okay, God, there is order in that. There is order in the way you have put all of this, and you have intricately designed all of this. He has a vision for the chaos. Second, well, actually, before I get to the second point, what I would say about that is this. For some of us, I have good news. I believe that God is still in the business of taking chaos and bringing order to it. He is still in the business of going into dark places and bringing light to those places. And for some of us, we understand that, right? I don't need to expand on that because you're like, my life feels like chaos, or I've been through chaos, or not even just individually, but collectively, we understand chaos. And I think the hope there is that actually God is still in the business of bringing order to chaos. He's still in the business of bringing light to dark. And I will cling to that hope. God's creation is good. Well, that seems obvious, like, oh, of course it's good. Like, it says it a lot in the Bible, and you really can't say anything else. But I want to actually expand on that a little bit. So as you read Genesis 1, if you noticed, it's not that we don't actually value the verses 6 through 25, like we're like, oh, just throw those out. No, but if you read through those, you read Genesis 1, you look at it and it says God created the heavens and the earth, and he looked at it and it was good. And then he separates the waters and land emerges, and it is good. And he brings vegetation to the land, and it is good. And then there's fish of the sea and birds of the air, and it is good. And day 6, right? This is like the crescendo. This is the climax. This is the masterpiece. He creates you and I. He creates man and woman. And we are unique in all of his creation. The reason we are unique in all of his creation is because we are the only thing that bears his image. We are image bearers. It says that we were created in his image. Now, when I grew up, and even I will admit, I even have taught this until this week, actually, I always read the text, and for whatever reason, I feel like maybe we've just have skipped over this. But we always say, day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5, at the end of it, God says, and it is good. And then after day 6, we say, and then he creates man and woman, and he says it is very good. And I used to stop on that and be like, see, we're very good. Like, we're better, more, like, we are in a higher place of honor because we are very good and the rest of creation is good. And I apologize for missing this before, but as I read the text in verses 31, it doesn't actually say that. What it says is, and God saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was very good. He took all of it as a whole. He sat back and was like, wow, the heavens, the earth, giraffes, and all the other stuff. And man and woman, it's very good. I'm pretty sure he said and all the other stuff in Hebrew. And it is very good. Now, let me go back real quick to the origin stories. Here's why I think it's important for us to learn and know about this. There were other origin stories that were floating around at this time. Now, in those other origin stories, a lot of them the result of how the earth came to be in their understanding was through the gods fighting each other and going to war with each other. And so, essentially, the earth came to be as a result of violence. One of them, the god of Marduk, was fighting another god, and I'm just trying to picture what that scene looks like. But the two gods are fighting, and Marduk wins, and he takes the other god's body and splits it in half, and the earth is a result of one half, and the heavens are a result of the other. Now, why I think that actually matters is because these other origin stories would tell of how the gods would battle and they would war against each other, and we came as a result of that. And people were seen to be to essentially be servants of those gods. And what we would do on earth is we would produce and make things and then sacrifice them up to the gods to appease the gods. That was the role of humans. So why does this origin story matter? Well, the Israelites, the author was going back. So here's where we get into the intent, is he was reminding his people, no, our story is different. Our story is different. This God didn't create the world out of war and violence. No, he created it because he is good and he has a vision for the chaos. And the difference in this story is he looks at his creation and he says, this is very good. And we are made not to be servants and to produce, to give sacrifices to the gods, but instead we are made to partner with God in the ongoing creation of his world. It's a different story. And I just want to pause real quick before I go to the last point. This was a good reminder for me this week as I was thinking through and preparing for this message. It is a good reminder for us to remember that God's creation is good. And the reason that's a good reminder is because I think it's really easy for us a lot of times to look around and start pointing out bad. Well, they are different than me, so they must be bad. They don't think like I think, so they must be bad. They're not from where I'm from, and so they must be bad. They don't agree with me on everything, so they must be bad. It's easy for us to demonize God's creation. But God would say, no, it's good. See, I have the pleasure of teaching Genesis 1. I'm not in Genesis. We're not to Genesis 3 yet. In the beginning, he created everything, and he said, it is good. And I actually want to hold on to that. I want to hold on to the idea that his creation is good. So the reminder for me this week was, oh man, I got to be careful. There are people, individuals, and groups of people that I look at, and I like to cast judgment and go, yeah, but they're wrong. They're not good. And it was a reminder, no, God's creation is good. Point 3, God invites us to be co-creators with him. What does that mean? There's a pastor, Andy Crouch, he uses the term, the cultural mandate. So listen, in Genesis 1, actually we get the very first command in the Bible. We get the very first command in Genesis 1. He says, be fruitful and multiply and go and fill the earth. Now, if we get the very first command in Genesis 1, that means that he gave us that command before Genesis 3. I went to Arizona State University and we learned math there. Genesis 1 comes before Genesis 3. Genesis 3 is the fall. Genesis 1 is the way that God intended the world to be, and he still gave us a command, the cultural mandate. Culture is all things that people make of our world, right? So our cultures have language, our cultures have food and technology and arts and sports and leisure, all these things. That is what makes up culture. And the mandate that God gives us and how we make the world is to go and be fruitful and multiply. To be fruitful means to produce. Means to produce. We are to produce. There's a great quote from a guy named Dave Lomas, and I want to share that with you. And this is what Dave says. He says, God is creating a good world full of harmony and beauty and potential where humanity, the image bearers of God, are to take up their vocation and co-rule and create with God. That is what God is doing in Genesis 1 and 2. This is awesome. Listen, we are not to be like, we're not just like dolls. We're not just robots. God actually creates each and every one of us uniquely. He gives us different passions and abilities and gifts. And he says, listen, I'm going to make you unique and I'm going to invite you into unrolling this world with me. He invites us to co-create with him. And he invites us because we are his image bearers. We are unique. Here's how I know we're unique in creation. Again, Pastor Andy Crouch said this. He said, it is only human beings that take wheat, because this world is full of wheat, and make bread. Right? We're the only creatures that take something that God has given us, and we use that, and we make bread. And bread was good, amen? Bread is good. God gives us grapes. And if you're Baptist, you make grape juice. For the rest of us, we make wine. And it is good. But God gives it. If you're a millennial, God gives you avocados and you make avocado toast. and it is good. But God gives us the resources. See, Eden is not something we should look back on and go, that's the goal. Hopefully we get back to Eden. No, Eden was the beginning. Eden was the start. Eden was where God put man and he said, here is all that you need to move this creation forward. Now go, be fruitful and multiply. Eden is not a museum. Can you imagine if Eden was a museum? I love to take my boys to museums. We've been to the Natural History Museum a lot. And what happens in museums when you have a 7 and a 9-year-old? This is what happens. Don't touch. Don't touch. Stay back. Don't touch that. Yeah, look, it's great. If Eden was a museum, what would happen? Well, this is how my mind works. I run the whole thing out through my mind and play it out. Come on, boys, come. Follow me. Yeah, stay behind the vine. Stay behind it. Yeah, look, it's a flower. It's cool. Look at all the animals. Come on, let's go. Don't touch. Yeah, look at the tree over there. It's beautiful, huh? Yeah, I don't know what that guy and girl are doing. They're not supposed to be in there. Christian jokes. Eden is not a museum. It is more like a playground. It is more like a sandbox. It is where God puts his people and says, now go and start creating. Start using your gifts and your passions and your talents and go create. And so, if you're in here today and you're like, I'm an artist. Okay, God's given you that. Go use that and create. God gives us all different things that we love, that we are passionate about. A few months ago, we took a whole bunch of high schoolers into the city, and we got to go to the skyrise up on the 38th floor overlooking Central Park. It was absolutely beautiful. And Craig Sider came in, and Craig sat with all of our high school students, and he drew some diagrams, and he said, what are the gifts that God has given you? What are the things that he has naturally gifted you with? What are the abilities, the raw talent that you have? And then what is it that you're passionate about? What gets you up in the morning and keeps you up at night? And he drew 3 concentric circles, and the sweet spot was right in the middle where those 3 overlap each other. What and how has God given, how has God wired you? How has he hardwired you to function in this world? Because when we can live in that sweet spot, then what happens is we participate in co-creating and moving forward his creation. Right? We're moving towards the kingdom of God being seen on here on earth as it is in heaven. How do we participate in doing that with him? He, in his divine plan, this is how he made it. This was how he rolled it out. He doesn't need us. He could have done it any way he wanted, but this was his plan. This was how he rolled it out. He invites us to co-create with him. He invites us and gives us a role. He gives us a purpose. He gives us a plan. Like I said, I have 2 sons, and my younger son, Micah, he loves to help me. He's like the greatest help. I thought about this earlier. We have recently started calling him Mini Josh because for all the good and all the bad, he's just like me, and he loves to be called Mini Josh. But he loves to help me. And so if I'm mowing the yard, he'll get in between me and the lawnmower, and he'll push with all that he's got, and we mow the yard together. And it takes a little bit longer and it's a little bit messier, but we get it done. Or if I'm working in the garden and I'm planting something, he'll get in, he'll put his little garden gloves on, and he'll get in and he'll start digging up and he'll start planting with me or blowing the leaves, which is always funny because he's just a little guy and the leaf blower goes back. But he loves to help me. And a few weeks back, I was getting ready to make dinner. I was getting ready to get in the kitchen and create dinner. If you're a chef, your job is to create food, and you should come to my house and co-create with God and be at my house and do that. But Micah was in the kitchen with me, and we were making chicken Parmesan sliders because it is good. And we got in and we got everything ready. Now, as his dad, I easily could have said, buddy, come in with me. Okay, I want you to stand over here and Just watch Daddy. Watch this. This is going to be great. And I could have done everything by myself. I didn't need him to make chicken Parmesan sliders. I could have done it all on my own. But you know what my greatest joy was? Was saying, buddy, get up here. Here, stand on the stool. Get your apron on. Go wash your hands. Get up here. And then and he sat and he got the chicken and he put it in the egg yolk and made sure it was all wet, and then he put it in the breadcrumbs, and then we took it and we put it in the coconut oil because we want to tell ourselves we're healthy. And we start making and creating dinner, but we're doing it together. And I would much rather do that than do it on my own. And you know what? It took a little bit longer to do it. And it was a little bit messier, and maybe it didn't come out the exact way that I was hoping it would, but I wouldn't have traded that to just do it on my own. Our Father in heaven is sitting there going, come on, get up here. Let's get your hands dirty. I want you to get in this with me. And does he need us? Like, does he need me to go and do this? Like, I don't think so. I think he could do it all on his own, but guess what? He invites me into it, and he wants that relationship. He wants to do it with us. He invites us to the table and says, let's go. Let's move this creation forward. So what are the gifts and the talents, and the abilities, and the passions that God has given you to participate in that? Because he brings order out of the chaos. His creation is good, and he invites us to do it with him. And the question for us is, are we ready? We ready to roll up our sleeves to say, all right, God, let's go. We're going to get our hands dirty, but we're in this with you. Let's roll it out. Would you pray with me? God, I'm so thankful that you are a God that doesn't just put us into motion. You don't just plot us in this world and we're robots, but instead you invite us into this creation to move it forward with you. You invite us to participate with you. You desire relationship with us. And God, I am so thankful for that. And I would just ask, God, that you would remind us that you bring order to chaos, and that your creation is good. And God, help us to know how. How do we get involved? How do we participate with you in your mission in this world? What is it that how have you hardwired us? What have you given us? And Father, that's where we want to live. We want to live there. We want to move this thing forward with you. Thank you that you're a God who includes us and you desire a relationship. And thank you for the love and the mercy and the grace that you have for each and every one of us. And it is in Jesus' name that we pray. Amen.